And usually these questions address this topic at a very superficial level. I just want to know if it's halal. Is it haram or is it halal? But as Muslims, my dear brothers and sisters, the Prophet ﷺ and his immaculate family, they taught us that a believer must be a critical thinker. It's not just about practicing Islam in a superficial way, where if it's halal, I'll do it. If it's haram, I'll begrudgingly refrain from it. When it comes to non-Muslim holidays, a better question to ask, instead of just asking, is it halal or is it haram, is, what is the origin of this holiday? Who are we actually following? Who are we imitating? What does this mean for my identity as a believer? You know, many of you might be familiar with the Amish community. Now, I know that people often make jokes about the Amish, but one of the things that I actually admire about the Amish is that if you look at all of the different communities around the world, one could argue that they are the only community that has successfully resisted modernity. They were able to preserve their identity in the wave of modernity and technological advancement. Now, when you look at this community, what you find is that this is a community. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we should imitate them or adopt their lifestyle, but there's something about the Amish that I think that we as Muslims should appreciate. And it's actually quite Islamic if you think about the way that they approach things. They are one of the few communities in the world that does not jump on and adopt new technology. They're very careful. They think about how this technology will affect them as individuals and, more importantly, as a community, how it's going to impact their identity. We all know, for example, that the Amish, they don't drive. They don't drive cars. They have a horse and a buggy. Now, most people actually don't understand and appreciate why they have chosen not to drive cars. If you talk to them, if you study the Amish, the reason why they have decided not to embrace this technology is because of a very simple reason. If you ask them, why don't you drive a car? It's a lot more efficient. You can save time. Why don't you join the rest of the world? They say that if we adopt and we embrace vehicles, if we all start driving, we will stop asking our neighbors for our needs. If I need, for example, brown sugar, if I have a car, I'm not going to ask my neighbor anymore. I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive to the supermarket. So they say we do not embrace driving vehicles. Why? Because it will break our interdependence. Because we want to be dependent on each other. If we embrace this technology, what's going to happen? We're going to be independent and it's going to fragment our community. And we are a community that values each other. We value community. We value our neighbors. We want to be interconnected. We want to be interdependent. We do not want to be atomized like the English. They refer to anyone who's not Amish as the English. Now, when you think about this, you might think to yourself that, wow, that sounds awful. They don't have iPads, they don't have laptops, they don't drive cars. I'm sure that their young ones are probably itching to join the modern world. But do you know, studies show that the retention rate, because they give an opportunity to their children to go and experience the world. From the age of maybe 15, 16, 17, they're given a time period where they can make a choice to live like the English or to stay and live among the Amish. What do you think the retention rate is? 95%. The retention rate is 95%. So 95% of those who go out and they drive the cars and they party and they go to these urbanized places, after some time they yearn to go back to what? They yearn to go back to their communities. They want to live by their values. So what I personally appreciate about the Amish is their intentionality. They do things with intention, with thought. They think about the impact that this technology will have on their communities. They're very adamant about preserving their identity. Now, when we come to the topic of non-Muslim holidays, a holiday like Halloween. You know, if you look at this holiday, at first glance, what's the big deal? Why is it that sheikhs are always such a buzzkill, right? Every time there's something that includes fun, you know, there's going to be a sheikh who's going to shoot it down. What's the problem? Why can't we just dress up in costumes and get free candy? And mashallah, some of us, we have garbage bags as if there's some sort of famine that we're, preparing for. What's the big deal? As I said, my dear brothers and sisters, as mu'mineen, we have to be more deep and more sophisticated in our thinking. Whenever we speak about any holiday, the first question that we should ask is, where does this come from? What is the origin of this holiday? Is this something that deserves to be celebrated? Or should we approach it with caution? When you look at Halloween, the origin of this celebration is that it goes back almost 2,000 years. 2,000 years ago, the Celts, they had this holiday called Samhain. And it was a pagan festival where on October 31st, it was believed, and this was practiced throughout Europe 2,000 years ago. It was believed that on October 31st, like today, that the barrier between the living and the dead was breached. This veil, this hijab, this barzakh that separates the living from the dead, it becomes permeable. Evil spirits are able to penetrate and come to the realm of the living. So what do? They say that the way that we protect ourselves from being snatched away by evil spirits is that we dress up in scary costumes, so that we blend in with them or we become unrecognizable. This was the idea. Now, when Christianity spread throughout Europe, the church, they tried to replace this pagan holiday with a Christian holiday. And this is, typically what the church did. Even if you look at December 25th, which is allegedly the date of the birth of Jesus Christ, in reality, December 25th, before the advent of Christianity, it was a day that was celebrated by the Roman pagans as the day of the birth of the sun god. And then later on, it was Christianized and it became the day that marks the birth of the Son of God. So in many cases, these festivals, they have pagan origins. Now on November 1st, in the Christian world, especially throughout Europe, November 1st marked All Saints' Day, and they used to call it Hallows Day. It was a sacred day. So they decided to do something with this October 31st pagan festival. So they called it what? All Hallows Eve. The eve, the day before Hallows Day. So All Hallows Eve eventually became what? Halloween. This is the history of this holiday. And then, of course, with the passing of time, Halloween loses what? It loses its religious significance and it becomes commercialized. It becomes a cultural event. This is just a quick summary of the history of this holiday. Now, you might wonder, what is the problem if a Muslim family decides to participate in this holiday? What's the big deal? It doesn't have any religious connotations today. So what's the problem if we decide instead of coming to Al-Mustafa, we all dress up as ghosts and goblins and we go around the neighborhood and at least I can get some candy from this annoying neighbor who's been double parking for the past year. I can benefit, at least get some payback tonight. What's the issue? You see, brothers and sisters, as I said, as mu'mineen, we have to look beyond the surface. The question that we should ask, the question that we should ask when it comes to whether or not we should celebrate Muslim is not whether it's halal or haram. What we have to really think about is, what are the subliminal messages that are being conveyed through the celebration of this holiday? If you look at this holiday, Halloween, you'll find that this is a holiday that subtly promotes ideas and attitudes that are actually antithetical to Islamic teachings. Now, yes, if you go and you send an email to your marji saying, is it halal for me to wear a costume and go collect candy? Yes, technically they'll say it's halal as long as you're not engaging in anything that the Sharia forbids. But as I said, mu'mineen are not just looking at this as black and white. They're asking the deeper question, how is celebrating and participating in these non-Muslim holidays, how is it going to affect the way that I think as a Muslim? How is it going to impact my identity? Am I going to start to internalize ideas that contradict the teachings of Islam? I want to share with you some of the problematic, subliminal or subtle messages that are found in this holiday for us to be aware of, that actually contradict the fundamental teachings of Islam. Number one, Halloween is a holiday that does what? It glorifies ghosts, spirits, jinn, devils. It celebrates it. It glorifies these entities. And it teaches people that we should celebrate them. It makes light of something that Islam does not make light of. When it comes to shayateen, Islam doesn't say dress like shayateen and celebrate shayateen. What does Islam actually teach us? Islam says that you should seek refuge with Allah from these things. It's not something to take lightly or to glorify. We have entire chapters in the Quran that teach us to seek refuge with Allah from these entities. So yes, you might say, oh, but we're just playing, it's just fun and games. Yes. But if a young Muslim child is engaging in these, participating in these holidays year after year after year, what happens? They start to glorify things that the Sharia actually warns us about, even if it's at a subliminal level. You might sit with them and they might be able to regurgitate for you what Islam says. But on a subliminal level, their subconscious starts to absorb these ideas. These notions that spirits, jinn, shayateen, these are things that we celebrate and we imitate and we dress like them, and they become desensitized to things that a mu'min should actually be quite cautious about. So this is number one. And of course, this is without even going into the problem of desensitizing children to blood, to gore, to violence. You know, we actually have some occupations in Islam that are by default makruh because of the impact that they have on the heart. So if there's no need in a society, in a community for a butcher, being a butcher is makruh. Why? Because the constant slaughter of animals, being exposed to blood and slaughter, can cause the heart to harden. That's why we have to be very careful when it comes to video games. Yes, it might be halal from a fiqhi perspective. But again, it's not just about what's halal and what's haram. What is beneficial for your soul? What is going to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is going to refine you as a human being? So this is number one. The fact that this is a holiday that glorifies and celebrates things that we should actually do isti'adha from. This is number one. Number two is that this is a holiday, like many of the other holidays, that promotes materialism and vanity. How much money is spent a year by people just decorating their homes with cobwebs and with ghosts, and the amount of money that's spent on decorations for homes, on costumes, on candy. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And this is a holiday that at least subliminally teaches what? It teaches children to associate joy and happiness with what? With materialistic things. With things that are frivolous. So this is a holiday that does what? It promotes materialism and vanity. And what does Islam teach us? حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا رَأْسُ كُلِّ خَطِيئَةٍ. That the love of dunya, the obsession, constantly trying to find joy and fulfillment in material things is actually antithetical to the message of all of the prophets. Our problem is not that we need to consume more. Our problem is that we have to actually learn how to detach. We have to learn how to be moderate. We have to engender zuhud. Zuhud is a virtue, not frivolous and wasteful spending. That's number two. Number three, Halloween is a celebration, is a holiday that actually mocks the unseen world. It makes a joke out of what? It makes a joke out of alamul ghayb. In fact, it actually fictionalizes entities that we believe are real. It treats spirits as something that's fake, that's not real. Jinn are not real. Devils are not real. It makes a mockery out of the realm of the unseen. It treats it as what? It's fiction. It's not real. It's scary, it's spooky, but it's not real. If you look at the Quran, what does the Quran tell us about the qualities of muttaqeen? The first quality in Surah Al-Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Who are the muttaqeen? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. The muttaqeen are those who what? They believe in the unseen. They don't make a mockery out of the unseen. They don't treat these things as fictitious or comical. In fact, if you look at Halloween, much of it is associated with death and spirits coming from the other side. No, this is not something that, when you think about it, it should warrant celebration. Ahlul Bayt, when it came to Alamul Ghayb, when it came to death, these were things that used to evoke not laughter and celebration. They used to evoke deep thinking. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, la basallu ala Muhammad wa alihi. What did he used to say to his companions? He used to say, "Udhkuru hadim al-ladhat." He used to say to them, remember the destroyer of pleasures. So they asked the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, وَمَا هَادِمُ اللَّذَّاتِ? What is the destroyer of pleasures? The Prophet says, Al-Maut, death. Death is not something to laugh about and joke about. No. It should make you think about your purpose, your destination. So this is a holiday that if you think about it, it actually makes fun of concepts and ideas that are meant to awaken our moral conscience, not laugh about it and make light of these things. You know, last night I was looking at some of the sayings of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayhi in Nahjul Balagha. Allahumma salli ala. And I came across a saying of Amir al-Mu'mineen that reminded me of Halloween, actually. Because, people, they see a skeleton, they laugh. They see, someone coming out of the grave with a shroud, they laugh. All of this is, it's taken lightly. If you look at saying 122 in Nahjul Balagha, it says that one day Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was following a janazah. He was participating in a funeral. وَتَبَعَ جَنَازَةً فَسَمِعَ رَجُلًا يَضْحَكُ. Amir al-Mu'mineen is at a funeral. There was a death in the community and someone is laughing. Someone is laughing, making light of this occasion. فَقَالَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ. What does Amir al-Mu'mineen say? He says, كَأَنَّ الْمَوْتَ فِيهَا عَلَى غَيْرِنَا كُتِبْ. He says, he hears this man laughing and he says that it's as if death has been written and decreed for other than us. That death is just something for other people. Other people die, I don't die. What does Amir al-Mu'mineen try to convey here? That laughter is not an appropriate response to death and dying. It's not something that should be taken. This should be a moment of introspection. كأن الموت فيها على غيرنا كتب وكأن الحق فيها على غيرنا وجب. It's as if the reality of death is something that is established for others and not me. وكأن الذي نرى من الأموات سفر عما قليل إلينا راجعون. And it's as if these people who have died, we treat them as travelers who are soon going to come back. No, but that's not what's going to happen. They've left. They've left this life permanently. نُبَوِّئُهُمْ أَجْدَاثَهُمْ. We deposit the dead in their graves. وَنَأْكُلُ تُرَاثَهُمْ. And we consume their inheritance. كَأَنَّا مُخَلَّدُونَ بَعْدَهُمْ. As if we will live forever after them. This was how Amir al-Mu'mineen responded to someone who makes light of death. Imagine Amir al-Mu'mineen, he comes to our community. This one is dressed like a dead person, walking around, laughing and, collecting candy. How do you think Amir al-Mu'mineen would respond to this? Would he say that, it's halal, go ahead, do it? Or would he remind us that there are some things that we don't take lightly? There are some things that are not a laughing matter. So this is another issue with this holiday. It mocks alamul ghaib. It takes this issue of the unseen very lightly. Number 3 is that you find that it also promotes a culture of indecency and moral decay. Now it's not just the children who dress up in costumes. No, you see the CEO, the professor, the adults. The adults are wearing costumes. And in many cases, the costumes are vulgar. They're indecent. They're sexualized. They're violent. And what is that? And what does Islam say about this? Islam is a religion that teaches haya, modesty, dignity. In fact, one of the muharramat for a mu'min is libasu shuhra. Did you know, brothers and sisters, that it is haram for a mu'min to wear something that will make him or her the object of ridicule and mockery? It's haram to dress in a way that's going to attract negative attention, where people laugh at you or people mock you. Why? Because a mu'min has dignity. A mu'min has honor. A mu'min is supposed to dress in a way that preserves their dignity and their honor. And then you come to the next. Number 5 is that this is a holiday that encourages what? Encourages greed and deception. You know, when people knock on your door, what do they say? What do they say? Do they knock on your door and say, Assalamu alaikum ya Ahl al-Bayt? They say trick or treat. As a young Muslim child, now I know you might think that Shaykh is going too deep into this, but everything that we do has an effect on our hearts. Everything that we see, everything that we do, it engages our subconscious. When we allow our children to knock on strangers' doors and say trick or treat, what are we teaching them? We're teaching them that it's acceptable to go and beg for candy. It's acceptable. That scaring people, it's fun. Deception is okay. You know, one of the reasons why Muslims, especially young Muslims, they're confused is because we send them mixed messages. On the one hand, we teach them what? That izzah is important. It's important to be honorable. But in the same breath, we say, okay, go knock on this stranger's door, you don't know who this is, and ask them for candy. There's a contradiction. No, I'm not trying to say it's haram, but I'm trying to say let us be deeper in our thinking. Let us make sure that we are consistent when we teach Islam. You can't tell them that Islam teaches honor and dignity, and then for one night, you send your kids to basically be beggars. Basically be beggars, that this is acceptable. But what's even more dangerous, my dear brothers and sisters, is that this trend of Muslims asking, can we celebrate this holiday? Is it halal for me to celebrate Christmas? The deeper problem is that this exposes an inferiority complex in us. That we feel that we have to be like everybody else. We have to fit in. Because we don't want to be the outliers. We want to be accepted. You know, brothers and sisters, we have many ahadith from the Ahlul Bayt that warn us of imitating non-believers, especially when it comes to things that have no benefit. You know, there was a time in our history when the Muslim civilizations, they were the trendsetters. They were the ones who were being imitated and emulated. Now, the Muslim has become what? The Muslim has become the one who consumes other cultures, forgetting that he belongs to the most rich culture, the most honorable tradition. No, we have to act like orphans who are looking for someone to take us in. If you look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the believers, so many ayat where Allah tells us to be careful who we take as our awliya. Because a wali, a guardian, is someone that you take your values from. It's someone that you imitate, that you emulate. Look at what Allah Azza wa Jal says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah 57. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, لا تتخذوا الذين اتخذوا دينكم هزوا ولعبا من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم والكفار أولياء. O you who believe, do not take as guardians people who make a mockery of your faith. People who belittle your faith from among the people of the book or the disbelievers. Don't take them as your guardians. Have a sense of honor. Have a sense of identity. You are not bankrupt for you to have to absorb whatever's out there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in another ayah, what does He say? In Surah An-Nisa, ayah 144, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, لا تتخذوا الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين. Allah says, O you who believe, do not take the disbelievers as your guardians instead of the believers. So what if you're the only family in the neighborhood that doesn't have Christmas lights? Who cares? So what if you are the only one who did not celebrate Halloween? You go to school on Monday. What were you for Halloween? I'm Muslim. I don't celebrate Halloween. We have our own holidays. How come the non-Muslim is not trying to celebrate Eid with you? Because he's confident in his tradition. He feels proud of who he is. He doesn't have to fit in with you. He doesn't come and try to act like a Muslim for 30 days in Ramadan. He doesn't care about Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. Why? Because he feels that I have my own tradition. So why is it that Ali and Fatima and Zainab and Muhammad at school, why is it that they're trying to fit in? We should take advantage of these holidays as opportunities to teach our children that it's okay to be different. It's okay not to fit in. You don't need to dissolve your identity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many of these ayat telling the believers that don't imitate them. The Prophet used to even say, do not even imitate the Jews in the way that they maintain their beards. Why? Because if you start to imitate them externally, in terms of their clothes and their appearance, you will start to internalize their values. And I've seen it. You see some of the youngsters, they start to dress like rappers. The ripped jeans, the ripped t-shirt, as if he's homeless, dressing like a rapper. And what happens? Subhanallah, it doesn't stop with the dress. You sit with him and he even sounds like a thug. You sit with him. He's Iraqi, born in Basra, and he's acting like he's Tupac. As if he's Jay-Z now. Why? Because he's imitating them. And this imitation has resulted in what? The loss of his identity. He doesn't have an identity anymore. And this is why Ahlul Bayt, they warn us that even when it comes to things that you think are trivial, be careful. Because this is how it starts. You dress like them, you talk like them until you become like them. And hence, if you look at, and this is exactly what Amir al-Mu'mineen says. He says, قَلَّ مَنْ تَشَبَّهَ بِقَوْمٍ إِلَّا أَوْشَكَ أَن يَكُونَ مِنْهُمْ. Imam says, very rarely does someone imitate a people unless he becomes one of them. So we shouldn't think that, oh, I'm just going to celebrate, but our kids are not going to be affected. Your kids will be affected. Gradually, when we don't filter what we participate in, gradually what happens is that the identity is lost. In a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ تَشَبَّهَ بِغَيْرِنَا. You are not from us if you try to emulate other than us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, I want you to follow the Prophet. I want you to imitate them because they are people of dignity, of honor. Why are you imitating others? And by the way, even if you try to imitate them, they will never accept you. Sometimes people think that if I just compromise a little bit here, a little bit there, they will embrace me. I'll be considered one of them. Your name is Muhammad, at work you're Mo, thinking that if I change my name or if I dress like them and I adopt their practices, I'm going to be one of them. Buddy, you're very wrong. You're not going to be one of them. And this is what Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, because even some of the Sahaba, they used to think like this, that if we make some compromises, some concessions, the Jews of Medina will accept us. The Christians will accept us. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in Surah Al-Baqarah? He says, وَلَن تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ. The Jews and the Christians will never accept you fully as one of them unless you abandon your religion. So if it's about acceptance, it's not going to happen. You will be more respected. Forget about acceptance. You will be more respected if you're proud of your identity. If you're proud of who you are. And as I said, we should not feel ashamed to be different. I'll end with this statement from Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says this in Nahj al-Balagha. And this is a reminder that we don't need to be part of the majority. It's okay to be part of the minority. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, أيها الناس, O people, لا تستوحشوا في طريق الهدى لقلة أهله. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, do not feel lonely on the path of guidance because of how few people there are. Throughout history, Haqq has always been on which side? The side of the majority or the side of the minority? The side of the minority. فإن الناس اجتمعوا على مائدة شبعها قصير وجوعها طويل. The minority are on the right path. The majority of people have gathered around a ma'idah, a table, whose satisfaction is very brief. This dunya will please you for a few moments, but it's going to do what? It's going to leave you starving. If you follow the majority, what's going to happen? You might experience a little bit of pleasure, but you will be emotionally starving because you disconnected yourselves from the true leaders, from the people who you should actually follow. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless us and guide us and illuminate our hearts with the teachings of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات المسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع اللهم بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
Inshallah, we are having a program, sport program for youth, men on the gym. And for ladies, there will be some programs in the Hosseini, inshallah, and then there will be refreshments. So inshallah, let's finish with the ziyarah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا حبيب الله السلام عليك يا محمد بن عبد الله صلى الله عليه وآله السلام عليك وعلى أخيك وابن عمك أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب السلام عليك وعلى بضعتك الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليك